I always find it hilarious when guys like try and like, this is the best operating system on earth. It's like, it just depends on the use case, I find, because I use Windows, I use Linux, and I use Mac.
Right.
So are you coding for like, is this just your own projects again? Or when you're coding in Windows, obviously you wouldn't be coding on Linux, or is that what you were doing back in the day?
Actually, everything I've written in the last 5 years is fully compatible that it will run on Windows, Mac, or Linux. And that's just been a case of, even if we're writing in C#, we use the Mono framework so that it will, again, run on the Mac and Linux. So I've tried to keep all of my code on GitHub building for all three systems equally.
So going back to like when you started, did you code as a child, or was that project that you mentioned that got you that sort of opened the doors at Microsoft, was that the first coding that you did really, or how did you get into it?
I was born in 68, so I was around 10 in 1978 to 80 in that window there, and I happened to walk into a Radio Shack store, and they had a box, the TRS-80 Model 1, Level 1, 4K, the very first one that came out from Radio Shack. And it said computer on the side, and I was pretty fascinated by that. So I asked them, can I use it? And they said, well, it's not set up yet. I said, well, can I set it up for you? And they kind of laughed at me and said, sure, kid, have a shot. And in reality, it's not much different than setting up a component stereo. You know, it's just cables from one to the other, except Tandy in their infinite wisdom back in the day used the same 5-pin DIN connector for power, video, and keyboard. So you had many chances to blow it up, but I managed not to. So once I had it up and running, they were pretty impressed by that, and they allowed me to ride my pedal bike down there every Thursday night for nighttime shopping, and I'd spend several hours on Thursday and sometimes on Saturday tinkering away on the TRS-80 Model 1. And I knew absolutely nothing about it. I thought it was a computer. So I was typing English sentences in and getting SN errors, which I thought were spelling, but were, of course, syntax. I just didn't know what syntax was yet. But within a week or two, I figured out that there was a set of commands in BASIC that you could use to build basic apps. And so I started coding in BASIC around 10, I would guess, 10 to 12, somewhere in there. And then by the time I was 15 or 16, I had tinkered a bit with machine language on the Commodore 64, and I moved pretty much to everything in assembly at that point.
So in those days, you were programming in assembly?
Yeah, largely. Well, the first thing I did was a machine language monitor. It didn't have an assembler, so it was literal hex codes. And if you wanted to insert code, you had to jump out, execute, jump back. It was just horrible spaghetti nonsense, but it was a good way to learn the lower levels of the machine.